The Woodley party camped for 2 days at the mouth of the Great Kanawha, a spot Simon Kenton cheerfully dubbed Point Pleasant, since it was here that a most pleasant coincidence had occurred for him, his being saved by the Great House Reese party. That's Simon Kenton. That's who we're going to be talking about in this episode of The Practical Woodsman. I'm Rut, the creator and host of The Practical Woodsman. That's right. It's my incredible genius which brought this all into existence. Scientists and philosophers everywhere studying my noggin, try to figure out its secrets and harness its powers. The reason why I'm wearing these here sunglasses is because I've got a problem with my eye. It looks real ugly, and I don't want my ugly eye being on the internet for all time. So I'm wearing these aviator glasses. I want to tell you in this episode of The Practical Woodsman all about, well, not all about, but I'm going to talk to you about Simon Kenton, my favorite woodsman of all time, bar none. Bear Grylls, all these other characters got nothing on Simon Kenton, a historical figure who was a frontiersman. He helped establish the area where I live now. And we'll take you to a place that I took my daughter earlier today, a place called Point Pleasant, West Virginia, which is just up the road here from me. We went and spent a day at the Mothman Museum. We also walked around and looked at this area by the Great Kanawha River where Simon Kenton named this area Point Pleasant. And so we're going to talk about that. But before we get into all that stuff, got to do the musical introduction to get us all in the mood. Winkety winkety. So don't go nowhere. I'll be right here when that ends. That's right.
Put a camp up right here.
So let me tell you about this Simon Kenton character that a lot of folks who did not grow up in this area, don't live in this area, don't know too much about him. They know something about his contemporary, Daniel Boone. That's right. Simon Kenton was a contemporary of Daniel Boone. And of course, you know, Daniel Boone got real famous with a lot of his exploits and being a woodsman and all that sort of thing. And there's no doubt about it, Daniel Boone was an impressive historical figure, but he's got nothing on Simon Kenton. And what happens is that Daniel Boone gets all the attention because he had better, I guess, marketers or whatever. Daniel Boone definitely had better people representing him than Simon Kenton, but Simon Kenton lived a much more interesting life. And I want to share with you some excerpts from this book called The Frontiersmen, which really tells a truly in-depth story, an in-depth life story of Simon Kenton, and also another contemporary of Simon Kenton and Daniel Boone, which was the Shawnee leader Tecumseh. Let me get you that book and show you the cover of it. So here's that book. It's called The Frontiersmen. It's written by Allan, Eckert. And really, I think it's my ex-wife growed up and lived all her life in the suburbs of Philadelphia. And I asked her one time, what's your favorite book of all time? She says, my favorite book of all time is The Killer Angels. The Killer Angels is kind of like the definitive novelization of the Civil War. Well, I never really understood why she was so interested in that book. Now I do. It's because she grew up in that area. She's familiar with all the places that are referenced in that book, when it says that something happened here or happened over there. Her mind says, I know that place. I've got experiences in that area. Well, for me, the best book I've ever written is this book here called The Frontiersmen by Allan Eckert, and it's for the same reason. You can see it's a big brick of a book, but it's for the same reason. I'm reading about places and people and rivers and creeks and places that I grew up knowing very, very well. And so this book just really does it for me. I want to read you some excerpts here of Simon Kenton so you can get a feel for what type of character we're talking about here. These are just some highlights from this book if you ever get a hankering to read The Frontiersmen by Allan Eckert. He had put to the test and not found lacking the secrets of effective tracking taught to him by this other guy named Grills, talking about Simon Kenton here, during their 6 weeks together. Always remember, lad, Grills had told him, the ground is an open book to those who can read the writing and understand it. It was true. The bent blade of grass, imprint of toenail or hoof, deserted bedding place, or fecal deposits spoke volumes to Simon Kenton. He could determine not only how long ago the creature had passed that point and what kind of animal it was, but an amazing number of facts, which even experienced trackers often overlooked. A day-old deposit of raccoon droppings, for instance, told Simon that the animal was hungry and had passed this way the evening before, shortly after having slept all day. Bits of crayfish shell and frog bones indicated it had spent some time the night before in a small, slow stream, probably Crow Creek, which emptied into the river a mile or so away. That's the Ohio River, or the Great Kanawha. With this and other information, Simon was able to deduce the exact path the animal had taken with incredible accuracy. Thus, it was with severe jolt to him now to know that at least 2 people had invaded his sanctuary. 2 rather than 1, because there had been laughter, and a lone man rarely laughs aloud. Really interesting insights into Simon Kenton and his abilities as a woodsman throughout this book. One part of the book, they're sleeping outdoors in the wild areas of southeastern Ohio, West Virginia, and Kentucky. It says soft mosses and dry leaves were spread on the floor for bedding, and a large fire area prepared in front of the open face of the shelter. Here they would cook their meals and at night wrap themselves in their blankets and sleep in remarkable comfort with their feet toward the warm coals. So while I was reading this novel, loved the descriptions of self-sufficiency out in the backcountry. Did you know that the Ohio River was known to the Shawnees as the Spele-Wethipi? Spele-Wethipi. If you ever visit the Ohio River, and you refer to it as the Spele-Wethipi, those in the know will say, wow, this person knows a lot about the history of the Ohio River. Where I'm at, I'm in a tri-state area where southeastern Ohio, Kentucky, and West Virginia all come together. Everybody around here refers to it as the tri-state area. It's all Appalachian tri-state. It includes Kentucky, West Virginia, and southeastern Ohio. And an interesting point about Kentucky is that the Shawnee Indians viewed Kentucky, they called it, as kind of a sacred hunting area. And so nobody would lay claim to it. There was no permanent habitation in Kentucky. They would share that hunting area with other tribes even. And there was an agreement among all tribes that there was to be no permanent habitation established in Kentucky. And the reason was because of this story that I'll read to you here. This is another excerpt from the book. The Shawnees, Blackfish said, cannot tell you that you are allowed to settle in the Kentucky lands. We have never owned that land. It belongs to the ghosts of murdered Asgans, a white people from an eastern sea. Long ago, our fathers and our grandfathers killed off the Asgans, but we now fear more the spirits of those people than our fathers and grandfathers feared them even when they were flesh. So that's the way they viewed it. They could go in there and hunt and share that hunting area with even whites. But as far as establishing a permanent living habitation there, they wouldn't do that because of this story that had been passed down to them over generations of these Asgans, these white people from an eastern sea. We are forbidden to settle in the country of Kentucky. If we did, these ghosts would not rise from their caves and mounds and slay us, but they would set father against son, and son against father, and neighbor against neighbor and make them kill one another. That was their belief about Kentucky. Now, about this Point Pleasant, West Virginia. It's where the Great Kanawha and the Ohio join. And so in the video later on, when we're there in Pennsylvania, when we're there, my daughter and I are there in Point Pleasant, I point out at the river, and I think I mistakenly call it the Ohio River. That's not the Ohio River. You get kind of turned around crossing back and forth over the rivers, and it's hard to know exactly where you're at. But I think I was actually I think we were standing at the mouth of the Great Kanawha River rather than the Ohio River. And then, you driving up out of there and there's the Ohio River. And so that's what I mean about getting turned around. A lot of history in that area. There was this great battle that happened between the Shawnee and the white settlers that were coming down the river and trying to establish living areas there in Point Pleasant and further beyond. But if you ever read this book here, The Frontiersmen by Allan Eckert, it details in great detail this tremendous battle that took place between the Shawnee and the white folk right there at Point Pleasant. And in the video you're going to see later on, I turn around, I'm showing this mural of this great battle happening on the shore right there. Well, that happened right there at Point Pleasant, this enormous battle. So right there where my daughter and I are standing, back in the 1700s, this actual historic battle took place there between the Shawnee and the whites, and the Shawnee just about wiped them out. Just about. They come very close to beating the white folk there. Fascinating history there in Point Pleasant. Here's some more about Point Pleasant. All three of the islands, as well as the shorelines on both sides of the river, were alive with Shawnees. This is there in Point Pleasant. Some were hauling canoes far up on shore to hide them in weeds and driftwood. Others were selecting strategic vantage points so that all avenues of river passage would be covered without the Indians themselves being seen by their quarry till it was too late. His finger on his lips to demand silence, Simon Kenton beckoned the five to follow him in single file. There was now no reluctance on anyone's part to follow the shrewd, young frontiersman. At one point, a companion of Simon Kenton steps on a big copperhead, was struck deeply in the calf. Here's how they handled that. Within 2 hours, the doctor's leg was swollen to nearly twice normal size. And by the way, copperhead's thick around here. While I was out there hunting mushrooms the other day and took you all with me, I told you, trying to keep an eye out for the morels, but also try to keep my eye out for any copperheads I might come across. So very accurate, this book, the research that went into it and the authenticity of it. So he gets bit by a copperhead on the calf of his leg. Within 2 hours, the doctor's leg was swollen to nearly twice normal size, and further travel was out of the question. So they established a camp. John Wood was delirious all that night and the next day, but on the second night he slept peacefully. After that, it was simply a matter of giving the wound time to heal before pushing on. And here's something interesting about their diet. What were they living on while they're dealing with this emergency out in the middle of the wild country of that time? Their diet during this period consisted of blackberries, soup made from a variety of roots, Simon dug wild onions, and the eggs of a wild turkey, which were on the verge of hatching, yet which all of them ate with gusto. Simon Kenton cautioned them all against using their guns, and what fires they built were small, used briefly for cooking. It was something of a paradox that while Simon Kenton was by far the youngest man here, he had undoubtedly become the leader, and his every suggestion was obeyed promptly. Nowhere before had there been seen such a profusion of game. Buffalo, by the many thousands, roamed the land, their great herds following the roads, quote unquote, which at some points were as much as 50 yards wide. 20 or 30 abreast, these bison herds often took 2 or 3 days to pass. The elk were more solitary. but even they would congregate in dozens by the great blue springs which fed a fine river. Hundreds of white-tailed deer, dainty and relatively unafraid, also came here and stared curiously at them. The streams, rills, creeks, and rivers were alive with fish, great yellow catfish weighing 100 pounds or more, and with a white flaky flesh better than any eaten before. Huge spotted garfish, oh, those are ugly, ugly fish, with alligator-like jaws, fine large bass, silver catfish and blue catfish, and huge humpback white perch, mammoth turtles, some with ridged mossy backs and tails, and others with greenish shells as soft and smooth as the touch of good leather. There were otters there, and beaver, mink and raccoon, weasels and skunks and possums. Great lumbering black bears were so common as to be frightening, and now and then when they shot one of these, the pair would roast the feet all night in hot coals and have for breakfast the richest conceivable delicacy. The trees and fields were full of turkeys and squirrels, pigeons and quail and grouse. It was a land of dreams, a land that far surpassed even the extravagant tales Simon Kenton had heard about. And because the game from miles around came here to lick salt at the springs which fed the large river, they named it the Lickin' River. And the bubbling springs themselves were called the Blue Licks. And that Lickin' River, I growed up being around that, hearing talk of it and seeing it on maps and all sorts of things. So very interesting to see where these things originated, the names for these things, and so on and so forth. Here's more about Simon Kenton, type of person that he was, type of outdoorsman. Simon Kenton saw everything in detail and committed every detail to memory. Every point, every unusual tree or rock, every game trail or Indian road, every spring or creek, every stretch of skyline, all were so indelibly impressed in his mind that once having covered a piece of ground, he never forgot it, nor the avenues of escape it offered should the need arise. Now, I'm definitely not on the level of Simon Kenton. He's something of a superhero among outdoorsmen, but I will tell you that at one time I took a buddy of mine out into the wilds of Pennsylvania, and we were walking along through this area of forest that I thought I had never been to before. I'd picked it at random, took him out there at random. We're out like on the third day, and we're walking through this area of the woods, and I stopped. He was ahead of me, and I stopped, and I looked around, and I thought, I've been here before. I recognized this completely no-name place out in the middle of the woods. I recognized that I had been there before. And I called him. I said, stop. We got to spend the night here. And we did spend the night there. And I remembered that I had gotten lost in the Pennsylvania wilds about 5 years, maybe longer than that, 6 or 7 years before this moment that I'm out in the woods with him. But I also have somewhat that ability to recognize otherwise featureless areas of the woods. I remember that I was there once before, almost the same, no different than like if you go to a coffee shop, you forget all about it and then you're there again someday in your future. You say, I remember being at this coffee shop. Well, for me, there are areas of the woods like that. And so hearing that Simon Kenton was also of this sort was interesting to me. In this book, you also get the story of the Shawnee, so you get the perspective of the Wyatts and Simon Kenton, but you also get a first-person telling of the Shawnee. And here's an excerpt of one of the Shawnee talking. When dew is on the grass in the morning, Chicksika told him, it will not rain during the day. And when it is not there just after darkness has fallen, it will rain before morning. When birds fly low and silently, a bad storm is coming. And when the dove sits close to the trunk of the sapling during the daytime, a great wind will soon blow. When the leaves of the maples turn over to show their underside, thunder and lightning will come soon. When the blackbirds flock together and start south when late summer is still with us, There will be much snow during the winter. When the swamp muskrat builds a low house of reeds and mud, the winter will be mild. But the larger and higher the house he builds, the worse the winter will be. And when he builds no house at all, but instead burrows beneath the ground, prepare for severe cold. For the waters of swamps and ponds and smaller streams will freeze to the bottom, and even the great Spelewathepe will freeze so that a horse may walk upon it. Remember, Spelewathepe is the great Ohio River. Although Daniel Boone was twice his own age, Simon Kenton got along with him very well. They were in many ways cut from the same pattern, happiest when away from civilized life, even that of these rude settlements, and sharing the same near reverence for the beauties of nature abounding all about them. In their first week of hunting together, they found themselves even more compatible than either had first realized. It was a rare pleasure for them both to share the wilderness with someone who could fully take care of himself, who did not have to be told to avoid unnecessary noises, who knew how to read and interpret sign, whether natural, Indian, or white, and who could be depended upon fully in event of an emergency. Such companionship is a rare commodity indeed, even in the world of frontiersmen. And I do got a story about that too. Same friend I took out in the wilds of Pennsylvania when I realized, hey, I've been here before. I got lost once in this area. First time I took him out, we got started late at night and we created our own camp down by a creek. I start getting the fire ready and everything, and I'm explaining to him how to get this fire going and the best way to do it and keep it going and everything. He says, no, I got it. And what I had realized, this is a friend of mine that I had grown up with in this same area. What I'd realized that I had been away, I'd lived in the cities for 20 years. And everybody I took out in the woods with me, nobody knew how to do anything. And so it was like I was babysitting for everybody. And here I was so used to having to take care of everybody. Suddenly I'm with my friend that I actually grew up with here. And he's looking at me like I'm talking down to him. Here's how you start a fire, here's how you do this, here's how you get your area ready where you're going to sleep and these sorts of things. And he looks at me like, hey, I know all these things. And of course he did. Of course he did. But this is what this passage here reminded me of, that it is kind of a rare thing to get out into the woods and enjoy the backcountry with people who revere it as much as you do and are as self-sufficient as you've tried to learn to be. So anyway, let's get on with the video here today. This is a video of my daughter and I going to Point Pleasant. We go to the Mothman Museum. So this is a video in part about Mothman, definitely about Simon Kenton, some of the history of the area, Point Pleasant, and did I say Simon Kenton? Well, it's Simon Kenton. All right, sorry about the glasses, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the show, and I'll see you on the next episode. Here we are in Point Pleasant at the Mothman Museum. There's the Mothman walking down the sidewalk right there. Look at him, wearing a purple shirt. All right, let's go in. I saw a picture of this. Look at that.
If I look away, it'll grab me.
All right, I got you.
It is quite great. She was frightened for her life. She said these men had visited her right in.
Dressed in black. I said, now this is too weird. But I know what took place. because the blouse that she had was ripped, and she would not rip her clothes herself.
Not long after, a threatening note was left on Connie's front porch.
She more or less crawled into a shell. She didn't want to be herself. She didn't want to go anywhere herself.
What? Oh, that little plush.
The Silver Bridge collapsed in December of 1967, everybody's attention immediately went to the recovery after.
All right.
Caused a rapid fracture of the lower limb of the eye. It's very clear once the lower limb failed, the whole eyeball would fail.
In 1926, the designers had been sure the new dresses of a suspension. Experience is the teacher, but when using new materials in a daring design, the learning experience can be tragic when collapse continues. This is Point Pleasant, West Virginia, on the banks of the Ohio River. The river is one of the most important waterways in the U.S. The first was a standard railway trestle, but then alongside it in 1927 came a state-of-the-art suspension bridge.
Yeah. Oh, look at that. Mothman test effect. There's the complete police uniform, Laura Landing wore. pretty sweet. You watch the movie, you'll see all these things. You ain't never seen the movie yet, have you? She doesn't like this. The mannequins. She thinks they're creepy.
The mannequins creep me out.
Look, he's just in deep thought. That's the only reason he's got that creepy look on his face. He's got to go to the bathroom. He's been standing there a long time. He's thinking, oh, just got to hold it until the end of my shift.
He's standing there. It's a collar. Look at its eyes. It's giant eyes.
Uh-huh. Those aren't eyes. Those are pepperonis that fell on its head.
Look at this thing's eyes. Look at its smile.
Is it smiling?
It's smiling. I think. It looks like it.
Mothman coffee. I've actually had that brand of coffee. It's really good. There's the river right there. Want to go check out the statue? It's right here. Let's go ahead and cross while we can. That big wall is the flood wall. So if the river floods, it keeps the water from flooding up into the town of Point Pleasant. Yeah. Here, let's go take a looky-see. The Shawnee there. Got a boat over here. All right. What's that? Oh yeah, it was flooded just a couple weeks ago. You don't remember? Yeah, flooded bad just a couple weeks ago. Over in Cincinnati, Ohio, the Ohio River was practically right up into Great American Baseball Park. Feel that mud? That's where the river left the mud up here on the bank.
I thought that was erosion.
Yeah, it's kind of grody jody, ain't it?
Yeah.
Look at that. Look how high up the water was when it flooded just a couple weeks ago. Look at this mud caked right here on the steps. The city will have to come over and clean all that up. All that debris that's left up on the steps. That's something. Take a closer gander over at the river itself. You wiping stuff on me?
No.
Now, let's not get too close. I don't want to slip in. This mud is kind of slippery. Right here's close enough. Look at that. The mighty Ohio. Point Pleasant, West Virginia. A fella over here fishing. I wonder if he's catching anything.
Look at that big ship.
Guy up there just waving at us. Starting to rain. Gonna play around a putt-putt. Mothman putt-putt golf. All right, let's do her. Point Pleasant was named by my favorite frontiersman, my favorite outdoorsman. His name is Simon Kenton. And a lot more interesting, a lot more, a much more interesting life than Daniel Boone. But Daniel Boone got all the attention. Let's see what this says here. See those Indians up there? Those were all the Shawnee that lived here before Simon Kenton and the other white men come into this here area. I'm surprised I ain't seen no reference yet to Simon Kenton. Let's check this out over here. The mural over here is beautiful. That was a beautiful mural there, the Indians and the Frontiersmen. Tell you what, for somebody who loves the woods, anybody who loves the woods ought to love the story of the Frontiersmen. And when they first come into this country, you see there were no houses over there, nothing. That was all wild, wilderness. That's Ohio over there. We're on the West Virginia side. If you go just a little farther that way, you go right into Kentucky. That's why they call this a tri-state area. I'll tell you, that is a beautiful mural. And what a great idea to show you what this bank would have looked like 200 years ago. Outstanding. That's really outstanding. What do you think?
Cool.
That is cool.
Black.
Uh-huh. All right. play some mini golf. 2. 3. 4. All right, I got to beat 4. Let's see if I can do it. All right, here we go. Not bad, huh? Yeah.
The alien has a butt.
He has a butt. Yeah, you need to put some pants on. That guy needs some pants. 2. I think you're right. Oh, you got whacker harder than that, I think. You're getting it. There you go. There you go. All right, you ready?
What?
You got to get it up in there.
Why? When you did that, when you made it in and I did that, and you did that, I just ran all the way over here.
Yeah, that was awesome.
I freaked out.
That was pretty cool. This guy thinks so. He agrees with me. Yeah. Daniel Boone cap.
And there's a little squirrel. Look. Smokey.
Smokey Bear, he's Tennessee.
And why is there a big pickle here? Oh, it's sidewalk.
We are right here.
Okay. How to use the pickle.
Wind up walking Bigfoot. Booger. The old booger of the hills and the mountains. That'd be fun. Walk around with. Be wearing in videos. Yeah. I like caps. I like ball caps. Like this. How much? Huh?
There's a Bigfoot back scratcher.
$200 million. I don't know. That might be worth it. I got myself a back scratcher. It cost me 99 cents from Dollar Tree. Old plastic spoon. It's the best back scratcher I've ever owned.
Do a job that's such a chore. As a man looks a lot like me. Be sure I got a hard story. I wonder how did he get there? As I see him in the rearview mirror, well, something tells me he and I the same. Walking on a thin white line, watching all the cars go by. Hoping for another.
All right, tell us about your Mothman doll there.
Well, he can cover his face, and he has giant eyes. He has these antenna thingies. He can cover his face. He's camera shy, by the way.
What'd you say his name was?
Jeffrey.
Uh-huh.
He can stand up and he can sit down.
That's right. There you go, folks.
And he has paws.
Jeffrey the Mothman.
Yes.
It's the Practical Woodsman. He's back again in your living room.